Like Professor Low have introduced, in this today's session, also in the next two sessions to come, I'll be sharing some of my experiences in learning design and instructional design with reference to the work I've done at Telly. So a little bit about myself. I'm an instructional designer, as Professor Law introduced, and also I'm a co-teacher for one of the undergraduate courses at Hong Kong U, CCSD 9003. So here I've thrown in a few hashtags for myself, describing my interests and also my specialties and things I would be more than happy to share with you. Active learning, flipped classroom, gamification, and in the past 3-4 years, predominantly MOOCs and also blended learning projects at Hong Kong U. These are the 3 MOOCs that I have worked with my team to develop. So I'll be referring to these examples during my talk, and hopefully all of these will help you to form a better understanding of the role of instructional designer. And that would be the first goal of this, my 3-part session, is to help you have a clearer view of the role of instructional designer or learning designer. I know in many cases that people use these 2 words interchangeably, but I think in many situations, you do find that they do very similar kind of scope of work. And I hope to bring you a more realistic view of what this job really encompasses. And also to show some tools that are useful for learning designers and instructional designers. Although a bit caveat is that I'm not saying that tools are absolutely necessary for you to do learning design. And most of the times it's really how you can make use of the tools to achieve the goal that you want to achieve in your design. And lastly, I hope that my sharing can also help you to apply what you have learned in the course in your mini course design project. Now, I've been part of this course for, this is the 3rd cohort, and over the past 2 cohorts, I've also seen teams struggling with their design to some extent. So I hope to incorporate those experiences to help you to apply your knowledge and the pedagogy and also the learning theories that you have learned into designing your own course. So the 3 sessions is broken down in 3 different topics, and today I'm going to talk about project management approach, which sounds not so much like a part of learning design, which is right. It's not really a discipline under in learning design. But I'm sure from my own working experience and also from how I observe the team's function, I guarantee you that this could be the most important skill set for you to work as a learning designer or even just to work on your own small project. So let's get started into our first topic. So far, is everything all right? Can everyone hear me all right? How's the speed? How's the pace?
Yes.
All good?
That's good. Oh, good. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. So I definitely did my homework of all those disasters of online courses, so I don't want to be one of them talking to empty air for half an hour. So today we're going to break it down into a few aspects of project management approach. We're going to start with thinking about the role of instructional designer or learning designer as a project manager. And with that, we'll tap into some of the key aspects of project management, including the constraints, the goals, the stages, and also introduce some useful tools. And at the end, I'm going to round up the session with one case that I have worked on, which is a MOOC project that I worked on for the past 1 year. I'll be using that to help you conceptualize all of these aspects that I have talked about. And here, one small tip I would like to share with you guys is because I can't really see everyone, and this is really something of my own habit. Whenever I listen to a talk or something that I usually is not really from my own daily encounter, I would force myself to take down the notes of 3, 2, 1. So 3 things that I've never heard of before, I didn't know before. And this could be as big as a whole discipline, or it could be as small as something that a book or a research paper. So I'm gonna note down 3 things I didn't know before, and 2 things that I would like to learn more about. These 2 can be from the 3, or it could be 2 completely different things. And then 1 thing that I would like to start working on in the next 24 hours. Now, the chances are, I'm sure Professor Law has arranged a list of really great speakers for the course, and also you're also taking other courses. But many of the times we get inspired by people, by their sharing of experiences, but we tend to forget it right away. So with this 3-2-1 approach, I found myself more benefiting more from the talks or some of the learning opportunities that I went to. So I'd really like you to give it a try in this session. And by the end of it, if you would like to share your 3-2-1s with me in any way, I'm very happy to look at them and also answer your questions if you have any. So again, 3 things I didn't know before, 2 things I'd like to learn more about, and lastly, 1 thing I would like to do in the next 24 hours. So with that, we go into the first big question. Why do I talk about project management? Is learning designer equal to it's a question that the answer obviously doesn't matter because it's not even in the same domain. But why I pose this question is because that's going to be a question you're constantly asking yourself when you start work on the learning design project. Because most of the times you will feel that this should be the job that a project manager is doing. Why am I doing it? And the reality is, unlike your group project that you're working on right now, you have 5 or maybe 6 learning designers in one team. When you actually go into the field, go work in the industry or even in a university, you're likely to be the only person who understands learning design, who is looking at this project from a holistic view, who's looking at it from end to end. And everyone else has their own focus in the project. So quite naturally, you will become the project manager because you are looking at the learning experience. So it's not surprising that we always find ourselves in the shoe of a project manager and might as well just own it. So as a project manager, the first and foremost important thing to understand is this very simple and elegant triangle, which called project triple constraints. It's so straightforward that I'm gonna give you 5 seconds just to look at it. It's very self-explanatory. Does anyone don't understand what is being displayed here? That's a bad question. That's a very bad example. If you ask that way, nobody's going to raise their hand. But this clearly just illustrates the 3 most important components in a project: time, cost, and quality. And these 3 go hand in hand. They are interrelated, which means when you change one of the constraints, the other 2 must change. So for example, if I want my quality to be better, if I want to have a larger scope of my project, then naturally I need to either extend the time or increase the cost or both. So that means this is important to consider when you start a project, even with your own group project. Most of the times your time is already fixed. You have a certain deadline, you have just this much time to deliver a course design, and you have a relatively fixed cost. And again, in your case, it's most likely the 5 or 6 members of you, and also what are the available online resources that the university is providing. So all of this is going to formulate these constraints for our own project, which will help us to identify what are the realistic goals. So when you move on with your mini course design, keep in mind and try to think about what are your own constraints, what are the cost of the team. Now here, some people always forget the important part, as everything is a cost. Now your team members' time, your team members' knowledge, and your creativity, your expertise, and also sometimes your intelligence, and someone knows someone. These are all costs of the project. And burning the night oil might save you with one assignment. And when you go into work, this is not going to save you with every project. So if I'm not being exaggerating, but the well-being of a project, of an instructional designer highly depends on how well this person can master this triangle. And so next, with this concept of constraints in mind, I'm gonna show you one example of how I work with my students in the course that I co-teach, CCSD 9003. In this course, I also assign students with the group project, and they are due by the end of the semester. So in the early stage, about session 3 or session 2, I'll give every group a worksheet like this for them to elect a chairperson, which is the project manager, and identify their objectives, their scope, their division of labor, and their scheduling. And with this, I'm trying to help students to build a realistic project within the time frame and to achieve the goal that they have set for themselves. Now, this sounds very similar to learning design when we identify learning outcomes, when we use scaffolding approaches. So these are very similar, but this is looking at the procedural side, the production side of things. Now I'm going to come back to this worksheet example later, so you don't have to read too much into it. So the next question is, when we have our time and cost pretty much predefined, how do we define the scope? Which means, how do we know what we can achieve with this project? Now here I'm borrowing the famous quote from Dr. Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. Which means when you start a project, you always think about what is the end goal. You want to visualize how that's possible. And when you think about your design of the course, how many slides would I have? How many sessions would I have? How many deliverables would I have? Now, if you can visualize them as detailed as possible, there's a good chance that you can define the scope, the quality of your triangle more accurately. And in order to do that, to have this visualized end goal, we need to define our strategic goal or strategic goals. Now, again, this term is very business oriented. I'm going to give you one quick example to show what is the strategic goal. This is the entry from one of the student groups in CCSD 9003. Everyone gets an A+, A- is acceptable but not preferred. B range or below is disagrees to the family. So apparently they had a very ambitious goal, excuse me. And when I put this screenshot and actually checked their grades from that assignment, everyone did get an A+. So setting this strategic goal for your team is going to help you to bring this team together. So whenever you go off street, you go slightly deviated from some of the plans you have set, you want to bring back this strategic goal and bring everyone back to the same page again. And so for some of you, currently for your own design project, there's a good chance that your goal is quite similar to my students. You want to get a good grades, but since some of you might also be working teachers, or you have experience with working with teachers, working as learning designers, you might want to set a strategic goal as something that maybe one of our team members can actually execute this plan in their classroom. And with that goal in mind, your design considerations will be quite different. And now I'm gonna give you just a list of several things you want to consider when you analyze, when you determine your strategic goals. So definitely on top of it is the course learning outcomes. What are the things we want students to achieve in this course? And what are the characteristics of the teachers or knowledge experts if you're working the industry for instructional design? And what are our team members' expertise? Sometimes I want to do a development project. I want to develop an app for my project, but I don't have any developer in my project. Is that an unrealistic goal, or how do I go about and solve this problem? And lastly, your LMS capacity or other capacity of your organization. And apart from these individual considerations, when you actually work in the institute, you might also want to consider the institutional factors, whether it's aligned with your program or curriculum design outcomes, whether it helps with the institution branding and reputation, does it involve any IP issue, and does it bring in potential revenue? And all of these are factors to help you to shape your strategic goal, and that is the goal that the whole team is working together towards. Now, once again, why do I emphasize that learning design is a project? If you're new to this course, but I'm sure you're not new to pedagogy, to learning theory, there is one characteristic of learning design, of designing according to learning theory, is that design is never ending. You can never say, I completed a design, I finished a learning design, because you can always make it better, you can always improve it, but a project has an end date. And just like an assignment has a due date, at certain time you have to deliver a project. So all of these goals is going to help you conceptualize and to have a very clear target of what you want to achieve by what time point. Now, since I can't hear everyone, so I'm going to ask the useless question again. Is everyone with me? How is the pace? Everything okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So now we have a very big overarching goal. The next phase is we want to go into different stages of the project so that we can eventually deliver it. Now, the first stage that I just talked about, the stage of defining goals, of defining your team's focus, is called the project initiation phase. In this phase, it involves a lot of things that you might be doing right now, which is brainstorming, and you might want to consult experts such as Professor Law and Leming. You want to do some research, you want to see what others are doing, and you need to do analysis of your own strengths, of the team strengths, and sometimes you might want to do a prototype just to test out whether your idea really works. Now, all of these is at the initiation stage, which means that this is the time when you bring out the moonshots. You can launch your rocket. You don't have to launch it, but you have to know where you want your rockets to go. Now, if you're working with your groups, but you think that you're still holding some ideas inside you, you want to wait maybe until early time that I'll tell everyone, don't wait. This is the time when you bring everything on the table so everyone can look at all of these ideas, all of these resources, so that you can formulate that strategic plan that we talked about. Now, once you're done with this initiation phase, we go on to the next phase, which is planning. Now, planning is the time when we really put the pins on the board. That means we want to formulate a plan that is realistic and is going to be delivered. Now, the planning will involve the timeline, several milestones, the deliverables, and also division of labor, and how you're going to evaluate this project that you're delivering. In your case, it might be easy because Professor Law is going to be judged it in a very clearly defined rubric, but how would you like to evaluate it by yourself? How would you say that is a project that everyone is happy with? And also, what is the communication channel? What do we use to talk with everyone? How do we share resources? Especially now, I understand some of you might not be in Hong Kong, and network could be a challenge for the group. And these are the things that we need to confirm at the planning stage. And the most important thing is, once the planning is fixed, we try not to change it. We stick to the plan. Of course, new ideas will come up, and we want to add new elements to the course. We just read something that's really fantastic, but that was for the initiation phase. Once we're in the planning, we want things to be set in stone, and we want to move forward. And after we have that plan, we move to the delivery stage. And at this point, we want to check all of the boxes that you have planned. And it's always a good practice that if you keep a progress log, at which day we delivered what, and also the communication log. Who said what at what time, which task did we give to a particular person. Now, this is not for us to point fingers at others if things go wrong, but this is really helpful for the team to work together to keep in sync with the progress of the entire project. And also keep a deliverable log. Sometimes if you work in video-related projects, you will understand that there are usually several versions of the videos. You really need a very clear deliverable log so that you can separate them. And also sometimes you need to run a pilot test. Things might not always work in the way you desire, so you want to make sure things are smooth before you deliver it. Now, this screen is probably the most useful screen if you are starting a new project with a team that you've never worked with. So I highly encourage everyone, I will share the slides. I think Professor Law already uploaded the slides, but if you like, I highly recommend that you keep it with you as a checklist. And sometimes you can always add elements to this checklist and to develop your own instructional designer or project manager checklist. And these will be very helpful, and also gives you the space to unleash the creativity of instructional designer without worrying about the management, the more operational and procedural side of things. So here, I'd like to show you a quick example of a MOOC project that I worked on in 2016. That was the first MOOC I worked on implant dentistry. And as you can see here, the project lasted for a whole year. From January, we actually started production a bit earlier than January. So at this point, we're just planning things ahead of us. So based on the production progress in the first 2 months, we were going to determine the launch day on March 1st. So on this day, we're going to decide whether October 1st was a feasible launching day. And as the production went on, we eventually had to postpone the launch day just 2-3 weeks later, but it didn't really affect the whole time frame. And sorry. So you can see several other things are going parallel, but as long as I can go back to this table, the team can go back to this table, we know exactly where we are and we know what everyone should be doing. And here is a more detailed deliverable chart with all of the videos, all of the resources that were put into this course, and with the starting date and end date, and also the stage of each of the small project. And this chart, if you're familiar with project management, this chart is called a Gantt chart. There are plenty of templates online that you can search for, and it's an incredibly useful tool for you to manage a multi-person, multitask project. And since I talked about tools, we can now move on to talk a little bit more about what are the useful tools. Now, just now, the 2 slides I showed you, those are all using Google Sheet. I personally am a big lover of Google Sheet. Before this, I was crazy about Excel as well. I love the formulas, but Google Sheet just is a lot more easier to share and also to tag each other in the worksheet. So most of my, I would say most, all of my projects that I've done, I use Google Sheet to manage everything. And also here, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Google Keep. It's actually a very handy tool that Google offers. If I can show you right now, here you can see this little button. And if you click it open, you can see I already have several lists here. You can just simply take notes by saying, this is my to-do. I've got task A or task B. And you can share this with your teammates as well. And you can, by sharing, you have to open it in a new window. And then whoever finished that task, they can take the box. And you can also input this into a slides. So this will be very easy for you to formulate your deliverable log and to-do logs. So for me, this is one of the most handiest tools that I really, really love. And also, Monday.com and Trello are more industrial favorite that I know a lot of people in the industry like to use these slightly more complicated and well-designed tools. I personally have not used them very much, and I've used Monday.com, the trial version. I'm not crazy about it because I do favor the flexibility that Google Sheet offers me. So I do recommend that you give it a try to see whether it works for you. And lastly is a little app called XMind, which is a free mind map tool that I recently have been using a lot for brainstorming and for just to put ideas together. In fact, I've been using XMind to create a little mind map for the 3 sessions that I'm talking. And by the end of session 3, I would like to share that mind map with you as well. So now let's get into a close look of a MOOC design. Again, the check-in question is, everyone still okay? And any questions at this moment? No?
Fine.
All right. So yes, now just follow me into this MOOC project that I worked on last year. I'm personally very, very proud of this project. We've got really good results. So the project is a MOOC called FinTech Ethics and Risks. This is a very new area. It was part of a FinTech professional certificate that Hong Kong U was offering. So again, to use my little triangle to illustrate the constraints we were facing, usually for an average MOOC production, we have about a year, around 12 months time. But because we were catching up with the schedule of the whole professional certificate program, we only had 8 months to deliver this project. And in terms of resource, the regular tele team and also the 2 instructors who are really excellent teachers from Faculty of Business, but there is no existing course that we can make reference to. These 2 teachers, they teach business ethics, they teach company law, but this is the first time that they teach something with a specific focus on fintech and ethics. So that was a very big challenge. That means we really have to design everything from scratch. And neither of them have any prior experience with MOOC, so they were really depending on us to bring this up to the delivery stage. And in terms of quality, the very first thing we thought about is to make this course engaging and inspiring at the same time, because we know that the #1 reason people drop out of MOOCs is because it's boring. And ethics in particular is what most people would consider a boring project, a boring topic. So that was our immediate thinking in the beginning of the project, that we need this project to be not boring. So that was our strategic goal. We need to do everything possible to make sure this is an ethics course that is not boring. Of course, this goal encompasses a lot of detailed, smaller goals, but let's leave it there that that's our top consideration, top priority. And this is on top of every other standards that we already have for MOOCs that we produce. So with that strategic goal, we entered the analysis phase. We analyzed the strengths and the specialties of the instructors and also the tele team. They come from industry, so they have a lot of cases that they have either worked on personally or they have experienced one way or another. So we really like this aspect of it because people love story. So we want to make part of the course story-based, that is all of the case studies. But nobody wants to sit around and listen to 2 guys talk about a story. So we decided to use the specialty of tele animators to animate those case studies. So that formulated our process A of the production, which was to animate videos for the knowledge delivery and also for case studies. And the next aspect is that both of these 2 instructors use Socratic method in class. If you're unfamiliar with this term, Socratic method is actually Harvard is most famous for this method, is when you give a class, you sit in a seminar room, the teacher is just pumping questions to every one of you. And after you respond, they'll move on to the next student, say, what do you think of his responses? Do you have anything else to supplement? So it's a highly engaging way of teaching. And very fortunately, both of the teachers use this method in their own class. So we want to leverage on that. And also, quite fortunately, neither of them are boring. So you can't work with boring teachers and make them non-boring. So with that in mind, we want to, again, leverage on another part of the expertise from the tele team, which is we have done some multi-cam live streaming experience. It's something like the television live stream where you have different camera angles and you're shooting at the same scene, but from a different perspectives. And that will keep the scene engaging and quite interesting. So that's how we determine the second process of the production, is to deliver, present some conversational videos based on the case study on the discussion. Now, with these 2 processes in mind, of course, there are other things that we had to consider, the usual ones, the learning outcomes, the assessment, but we'll talk more about that later. And now we just focus on these processes. Now, remember, we still have the time constraint. We only had 8 months, but we need to get them done. And drawing and video editing, all of these are extremely time consuming. And normally, this is the production process of any instructional videos. You go from script and then storyboard and go into filming and editing, and then the instructor is going to review it and then give your feedback, re-editing, review, editing, several rounds of it, and then you move on to the final video. This process is very time consuming, and we obviously couldn't afford that. So instead, with the process A, since we were going to draw, so we brought in our animator in the process and moved everything beforehand. After the script is compiled, I will start work with our animator on the storyboard. And once the storyboard is done, we move on to the filming. And at the same time, we add all of those storyboards into the raw clip for the teachers to review. Now at this stage, they've pretty much see what the outcome will look like. So they can give us some feedback based on this rough output, and we can amend anything that was not right or not exactly what they were trying to elaborate. And then based on these, the animator will move on to the drawing process. After they've done the drawing, another review, and then go on to do the animation. At this point, everything is already confirmed. And then it's just about pushing it into the final video. Now in this way, we pretty much saved 2 to 3 rounds of reviewing in the production phase. And still we have the process B, which was a lot of videos to be shoot, but really not enough time for editing. So again, back to the live streaming setup that I talked about. As you can see, we set up 3 cameras, one facing the front of the 2 teachers and one on the side, one on the other side. So we can have a nice capture of everyone's expression. Then in this session, we want them to talk as if the camera is another person. Now, as you can see at the corner, that's me sitting there. My role in this filming is to constantly prompt them to remember that, hey, there is still a person here. You want to turn to the camera and then throw a question at the camera, and also to keep them engaged, keep making conversation, making eye contact with the camera. And as you can also see, there's Coke to keep them pumped, because you really need extreme excitement when you are on camera so that you can make the audience feel that you are interesting, you are engaging them. And there are many other considerations in these processes, but with this practice, we moved on. So we were able to reduce the editing time, that way meeting our target timeline. The result, as we said, we wanted course to be not boring. So we really emphasized on the engagement level of all of the videos and the course design. So in the first course run, we had about over 8,000 enrollment, and these are students from all over the world. And the video engagement rate was over 80%, which means everyone who clicks open a video finished at least 80% of it. And if you're familiar with educational videos, this number it's rock solid high. It sounds depressing that nobody finishes it, but the reality is that they might just skip the intro and the summary, and that's already, they are consuming all of the content part of the videos. And most interesting and most satisfying is that we were able to generate over 5,000 discussion threads on the discussion board. Now, Professor Lau is sharing the frustration of people not posting in the discussion board. So I'm gonna leave a little note here. I'll come back to this in the next session when we talk about designing for cognitive learning outcomes. And lastly, the 2 team was also acknowledged for the work that we put in. The 2 teachers won a teaching award this year, and my team who developed the course also won the Hong Kong EU Professional Service Award. Now, although these were not the strategic goal that we put in, but it was really something that we figured was worth trying for, and eventually our work was being acknowledged. So this little case I shared, I hope that you can see how a project management approach alongside with the learning design considerations can help you to really make your course deliver. It's not just to have a beautiful design, but really eventually put all of your design into action. So a little bit summary of what we talked about today. First of all, embrace your role and your constraints. Being an instructional designer means that at certain times you have to be the project manager. So just to understand all of the constraints you have and work with them. And like I said, begin with the end in mind. Discuss with your group mates, what is your strategic goal? Does everyone want an A? Does everyone want to bring this online? What is the goal that we're working towards? And plan and stick to it. When you formulate a plan, when you agree on a deadline, do not change it. And last thing is, do not look back. There are always times that we think, oh, that thought I had a few weeks ago, that was already outdated. But that's for the next time, for the next project. At this moment, move on with your project and deliver it. So that's pretty much what I have for today. And like I said, for the next week, we'll talk a bit more on cognitive learning outcomes. I'll be able to share a bit more on the cases that I've worked on. Like I said, if you have taken notes on the 3-2-1s, feel free to share with me either by email or just even in the chat room. I'm happy to answer your questions or help you to follow up on some of the ideas you had. So I think my time is up.